Hello, my name is Abel Abelson. I'm the writer of Setting Free the Intellectually Gifted and How to Handle Neurotypicals. See the link in the description. And today I'd like to share my experience with the imposter syndrome. So the imposter syndrome is defined as having the idea that you're not as competent as others perceive you to be. So your own perception of yourself is that you're a kind of an imposter, that you're in doing some work or you have a function in an organization that you actually do very well and everyone else thinks you do very well, but you feel as if you're an imposter, as if you're not really up to the job, as if you're not really competent enough to do it, and as if each day you are taking someone else's place that should be there in your place, but you're doing it anyway, things like that. So as I've mentioned in my other videos, I've been tested intellectually gifted when I was more or less 40. So that means that up until that age, I never had an idea that I was intellectually gifted. So in that case, you could say it's difficult to say you have an imposter syndrome because maybe you weren't even competent. You know, if you don't know, if you haven't got a figure that really describes or measures your intelligence in this case, maybe you just aren't intelligent and there isn't any imposter syndrome. Maybe you are just an imposter, let's say. But the funny thing is that even after my IQ test, I still had and have actually this imposter syndrome. And I've been thinking a lot about it, and I think I have a few interesting angles why I would still have this imposter syndrome. So in my case also, almost everyone around me perceives me as being very competent and intelligent actually, and good at what I do. I'm also kind of a perfectionist, so that even adds to the picture. And still I have this impression that I don't do things very well and that I'm not the man for the job and that someone else would do it better. The first reason is that I think this goes for everyone. To yourself, you feel normal, neutral. I mean, I don't wake up in the morning thinking, my God, I'm so intellectually gifted or I'm so intelligent. I really don't. I really don't think I'm intelligent. It's not something that's part of my mind. I just think I'm me and I do stuff, and some things I do good and other things I do really awfully bad and other things I do like neutral. That's my experience in life. The thing is, it's of course relative. So while I feel I just do things normally, nothing special, if those around me have more difficulty with doing what I do, or they can't do it, then of course it becomes special. Still, that doesn't take away this personal sensation that there's nothing special going on with me, that whatever I do, it's just normal and natural. Unless, of course, I do a really big effort myself, and then if I succeed in what I wanted to do, then I can have this feeling of, wow, I did something special because I really did something that's extraordinary for me. But if I don't do that, and most of the time in my work, for instance, I don't really go to extreme lengths to do something extraordinary, very special. And I also see I have this big negative bias. So everyone has negative bias. It's how the brain works. But I maybe have a bigger negative bias than others, which means that I tend to give a lot more weight and attention to stuff that goes not so well compared to stuff that goes well. I have the idea if it goes well, it doesn't need attention. It goes well, and I focus everywhere on whatever's going wrong. So I have this negative bias also towards myself. So I see myself during a work day and I see myself doing stuff that's not very special. That's how it feels. and I make a lot of mistakes because of my negative bias and just because I make mistakes also, like everyone. So at the end of the day, I have the idea that I didn't really deliver. I didn't deliver what I kind of promised I would do that day unconsciously. You know, it's like in the morning I would go to work, and it's like unconsciously I have this deal that I'm going to do a lot of stuff really good. And in the evening, I have the idea that I didn't do really very well. I didn't do anything special. I made a few mistakes, or I forgot something, or I didn't do it as good as I could if I had more time, for instance, or if I put more attention to it. Anyway, I have this impression that I didn't do very well, and especially not something very special. So I feel like an imposter. I think that's one aspect. The perception of yourself relative to yourself, which is, of course, neutral by definition. The second aspect has to do with introversion. So I'm an introvert, like to do things by myself, and I'm quite reserved also. So you really have to know me for a longer time, and we really have to have a kind of personal connection before you're going to know a lot about my inner workings and what's going on inside of me. So this means I also don't check all the time what other people are really thinking and feeling towards me. I'm kind of live and let live. But the problem with this, as such, there is no problem. Introversion is not like a disease, it's just a characteristic. It has a lot of advantages and disadvantages also, like everything, but it's no deal, it's no problem. One of the pitfalls of this introversion, however, is that I don't ask feedback from others. So I rely on what my idea is that others have about me. And as I said also in a few other videos, and as I explain also in my book on how to handle neurotypicals, a gigantic pitfall for neurodivergent people, like intellectually gifted, but also other kinds of neurodivergence, like Asperger's and you name it, whatever, is that if we project ourselves on other people, if we have this blank slate idea that everyone is basically the same apart from a few educational and cultural differences, then we are very much mistaken, because we are neurodivergent, so we are outside of the big chunk in the middle where everyone is kind of more or less equal, more in characteristics. And if we project ourselves on everyone else, we will think that they think something that they really don't think, because they're not like us, they're not like me, a lot of people, which is okay, it's no problem. But if I project myself on them, and I think they basically function completely in the same way as me, apart from a few educational and cultural differences, I'm really very, very much mistaken. Which means that if I don't ask feedback and I don't accept their feedback, I imagine their feedback, and I'll be most of the time rather mistaken, because they simply function in another way than me. They have other preferences, they have other priorities, they feel stuff a bit different than me, they think about things in a different way than me. So this will also add to my imposter syndrome, because I will imagine that they will look at me, also again with my negative bias, in a kind of negative way, which will feed this imposter syndrome. The third aspect is that I think I compare myself with my own ideal, while other people will compare me with the norm, let's say. And so, as an intellectually gifted or an otherwise neurodivergent person, your idea of yourself is probably more demanding than what other people have as an ideal. If you just think about intelligence, their ideal of intelligence, as the norm is like an IQ of 100, maybe it will be like 110. That's like already very good for them. If you have 130 or 140 or something like that, and you put an ideal for yourself which would correspond like with 150 or 160, your ideal is really way off the scale for them. So I have a kind of imposter syndrome where I feel as an imposter because I don't correspond with my own ideal, while at the same time I correspond with their ideal, or I'm even a bit above it. And that's not only concerning intelligence, it's also concerning conscientiousness and empathy and stuff like that. The thing to keep in mind with the neurotypical, really actively in mind, is that it's not as if they're neutral, in the sense like on 0. It doesn't mean that on a psychopathy scale they're on 0. They're not very bad, but they're not very good either. They're a bit psychopathic. It's how the psychopathy scale works. Everyone is somewhere on the psychopathy scale, and it's only if you're higher than a certain level that you're labeled psychopath. And everybody has a certain degree. Well, they're in the middle. On the empathy scale, they'll be in the middle. They won't be very empathetic. They're not extremely non-empathetic, but they won't be very empathetic. And so if you're neurodivergent and you're, for instance, higher in conscientiousness or empathy or intelligence or a few of those, and you have as an ideal an even higher level of all those, this will also lead to a kind of imposter syndrome, where it's like you feel each day that you're imposing as someone that should be more empathetic, someone that should be more conscientious, someone that should be more intelligent even, and you're not, while the others, they already perceive you as above the normal level of all these characteristics. So what can we do with all that? The first thing I think that's very important is to realize that you're neurodivergent, that you're different, and that there's a biological basis for this difference. That's not the 100% of the cause and the effect, but it's important and it's there. And that's so you have to stop projecting, and you have to learn about others, in what way they are different, not expect stuff from them they're not capable of, etc., etc., etc. There's a whole world to explore once you get into this idea of neurodivergence, once you really start to let it sink in and do its work in your memories and in your perception and in your ideas about the world and people and politics and religion and all of that. It all changes when you put the ingredient of neurodivergence in there, which is also why I wrote my book, How to Handle Neurotypicals, where all of this comes into play. And it really helps to move in safe and agreeable and beneficial ways in the world. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that we really need to ask feedback from others, and others don't have a problem with giving feedback. If you go to someone and you say, I'm this and I'm that and I'm that, or you go to them and you ask them, how do you feel about what I did? What did you think about what I said there? Or they won't have a problem with the second option. You know, like you're just asking and they can give their opinion. They adore giving opinions. People adore when you ask their opinion and you're open to it and you really accept it. So thanks for watching. Thanks for leaving thumbs up, comments, for sharing, etc. Those people who read my books and have left a review, you're so great. Thank you so very much. That's really very important. You're fabulous. And see you next video. Bye.